Helios 522, Athens control. How do you hear me? The radio crackles with static, each second of silence stretching like an eternity. Controllers lean forward, trying again with increasing urgency. Helios 522, please respond immediately. But high above the brilliant blue Aegean Sea, a Boeing 737 was flying on autopilot with 121 souls aboard, all unconscious, their bodies slumped in seats while the aircraft continued its programmed path like a mechanical ghost. The engines hummed steadily, fuel slowly burning away, carrying silent passengers toward an inevitable tragedy in what would become aviation's most spine-chilling ghost flight. August 14, 2005. Started like any glorious summer morning at Larnaca International Airport in Cyprus, with the Mediterranean sun painting golden streaks across the pristine tarmac. Passengers began boarding Helios Airways Flight 522 at Gate 3, faces bright with anticipation for what should have been a routine journey to Athens, then continuing to Prague. Among the 115 passengers were young families with children clutching favorite toys, elderly couples embarking on European adventures, business travelers checking emails one final time, teenagers with backpacks full of dreams for summer holidays, and parents taking long-planned vacations they had saved years to afford. The diversity of hopes and dreams aboard this flight would make the coming tragedy heartbreaking beyond measure. Captain Hans-Martin Schneider, a distinguished 58-year-old German pilot with over 16,000 flight hours, methodically conducted pre-flight checks with meticulous precision that had earned him respect throughout his 3-decade career. His reputation for thoroughness and calm decision-making under pressure had made him a mentor to younger pilots. Beside him worked First Officer Pambos Charalambous, a dedicated 51-year-old Cypriot pilot, whose enthusiasm for flying remained as strong as when he first earned his wings, eager to learn from the experienced captain on this seemingly routine morning flight. The cabin crew, led by experienced flight attendants including Andreas Prodromou, who also held a private pilot license, smiled warmly as they welcomed passengers aboard and helped travelers stow luggage, locate seats, and answer questions about the flight ahead. These professionals had collectively welcomed tens of thousands of passengers over their careers, performed safety demonstrations countless times, and handled everything from anxious first-time flyers to demanding business travelers with grace and genuine care for passenger safety. The Boeing 737-31S, registration 5B-DBY, was a reliable workhorse that had faithfully served multiple airlines since 1998. This aircraft had accumulated over 16,900 flight hours, transported hundreds of thousands of passengers safely across Europe and the Middle East, and maintained an exemplary safety record with no major incidents throughout its 7-year operational history. As passengers settled into seats, families helped children adjust air vents and buckle seatbelts. Adults performed the modern ritual of checking phones before switching to airplane mode, and flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures with practiced efficiency. Their voices calm as they explained oxygen mask procedures that would soon become tragically relevant. Captain Schneider and First Officer Charalambous completed extensive checklist items with methodical precision, reviewing weather conditions, showing clear skies perfect for flying, calculating fuel requirements, programming the flight management computer, and testing aircraft systems while ground crews performed final inspections. The twin engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, and at exactly 9:07 a.m. local time, Flight 522 lifted gracefully off runway 04 into the clear morning air, climbing toward 34,000 feet that would prove fatal to everyone aboard. But something was catastrophically wrong, and the seeds of this unthinkable disaster had been planted the previous evening during what should have been completely routine maintenance procedures performed by experienced, qualified technicians. During the mandatory pressure leak test, conducted by Helios Airways ground maintenance crews on the night of August 13th, a procedure required by aviation regulations to ensure aircraft cabin pressure integrity, skilled technicians had methodically switched the cabin pressurization system from its normal automatic mode to manual mode, a standard practice that allows maintenance personnel to test the aircraft's ability to maintain pressure while parked at the gate. This pressure test, performed thousands of times daily across the global aviation industry without incident, requires the pressurization system to be manually controlled rather than relying on automated systems that normally manage cabin pressure during flight. The maintenance crews completed their work efficiently and professionally, according to established procedures, documented their findings in the aircraft logbook, identified no problems with the pressurization system, and signed off on the Boeing 737 as completely airworthy. However, in the complex choreography of aircraft maintenance involving dozens of specialists working on multiple systems simultaneously, and in the routine of procedures repeated night after night, the critical cabin pressurization selector switch was never returned from manual test position to the automatic position required for normal flight operations. The small control panel placard that should have read "Auto" instead displayed "Man," a seemingly insignificant detail that would become one of the most consequential oversights in aviation history. As Flight 522 climbed higher into progressively thinner atmosphere where humans cannot survive without pressurized air, cabin pressure began dropping at an alarming rate instead of being automatically maintained at safe levels. The aircraft's sophisticated warning systems immediately detected this dangerous condition and activated multiple alerts throughout the cockpit. Master caution lights flashed amber, audio chimes sounded repeatedly, and warning messages appeared on display screens. But tragically, the crew misinterpreted these urgent signals as equipment cooling problems rather than recognizing them as alerts for a life-threatening pressurization failure. At 34,000 feet above sea level, where outside air temperature plummets to -70 degrees and contains barely 25% of sea level oxygen, insufficient to sustain consciousness for more than minutes, the cabin altitude began climbing at a terrifying rate toward universally fatal levels. The first signs of hypoxia, oxygen deprivation that kills silently and mercilessly, would have manifested subtly. Passengers might have felt slightly lightheaded, perhaps attributing it to normal flight sensations or anxiety about flying. Maybe gentle euphoria that some might have mistaken for excitement about their journey, possibly difficulty concentrating as brain function began deteriorating. The flight crew, focused intently on what they believed was an air conditioning malfunction, began working through troubleshooting procedures while their own cognitive abilities slowly deteriorated. Hypoxia represents aviation's most insidious killer because it robs victims of their ability to recognize their own impairment and take corrective action. As oxygen levels dropped below thresholds necessary for brain function, confusion set in like fog, followed by dangerous euphoria that makes victims feel artificially calm even as death approaches, then unconsciousness arriving as gently as falling asleep. The yellow oxygen masks deployed automatically from overhead compartments with distinctive mechanical thumps when sensors detected the aircraft had climbed beyond 14,000 feet equivalent pressure altitude. These masks, suddenly dangling throughout the cabin like surreal decorations in what had become a high-altitude death chamber, represented passengers' only lifeline to survival. But hypoxia had already begun its deadly work on everyone aboard. In critical minutes following deployment, when immediate action meant difference between life and death, passengers already suffering oxygen deprivation might not have understood the urgent necessity of securing masks immediately and breathing normally. Some passengers may have fumbled helplessly with straps while coordination deteriorated. Others might have been too confused to comprehend what was happening. And still others could have been overcome by hypoxia's euphoric phase that makes people feel strangely calm about deteriorating situations. Even more tragically, these emergency masks provided only 12 minutes of oxygen flow, completely inadequate for survival during extended flight at cruising altitude, where thin outside air cannot support human life. Captain Schneider's final radio transmission crackled through the airways at precisely 9:20 a.m. local time. Just 13 agonizing minutes after takeoff from Larnaca Airport. 13 minutes during which a routine passenger flight had transformed into an airborne death trap, carrying 121 people toward their doom. His voice, transmitted through aviation radio frequencies to Athens Air Traffic Control, would be forever etched in aviation history. Athens Control, Helios 522, requesting descent due to air conditioning problems. These words, spoken with the professional composure and calm demeanor expected from an experienced airline captain even during equipment malfunctions, already carried the subtle but unmistakable slurred speech quality characteristic of someone whose brain was being systematically deprived of the oxygen it desperately needed to function normally. This final transmission would become the last coherent communication ever received from Flight 522, the final words spoken by a flight crew that was rapidly and unknowingly losing their battle against an invisible killer that had invaded their pressurized sanctuary at 34,000 feet. Captain Schneider had no way of knowing that his request for descent due to air conditioning problems was actually a desperate plea for the emergency descent that could have saved every life aboard his aircraft, if only he had recognized the true nature of the crisis developing around him. After that transmission faded into static, ominous silence descended over the aircraft's radio frequency, stretching on for hours. Athens Air Traffic Control, initially assuming the crew was busy with their reported problem, waited reasonably before attempting contact again. But as minutes stretched without response, routine calls escalated to urgent pleas broadcast across emergency frequencies. Helios 522, Athens Control, are you receiving? Please respond immediately. Controllers repeated with growing desperation, their voices carrying concern rapidly transforming into dread as they realized something catastrophic was occurring aboard the silent aircraft. Greek Air Force fighter jets scrambled to intercept the wayward Boeing 737, racing through morning sky with afterburners blazing. F-16 pilots approached Flight 522 with professional caution and growing horror as they maneuvered into formation alongside the larger aircraft. What they saw through cockpit canopies would haunt them forever. Peering through the Boeing's windows, they observed Captain Schneider slumped forward over controls, completely motionless. First Officer Charalambous was similarly incapacitated, showing no signs of movement despite military aircraft flying just yards away. The view into the passenger cabin was even more disturbing. Through small windows, fighter pilots could see rows of passengers sitting upright like mannequins, some still wearing oxygen masks that had failed to provide salvation, others slumped in positions suggesting gradual loss of consciousness. There were no signs of panic. No evidence passengers had understood their situation before hypoxia claimed their lives. Children sat motionless beside parents who would never wake up. Business travelers remained positioned as if still working, and flight attendants were visible at stations, having succumbed while attempting to perform duties. Take a moment to imagine the absolute helplessness those fighter pilots must have felt, watching 121 people die slowly while being completely powerless to help. Have you ever witnessed something terrible happening but felt unable to change the outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments below about moments when you felt helpless in the face of tragedy. Your stories might help others who have faced similar feelings of powerlessness. For over an hour, Flight 522 flew in perfect circles following its programmed route, while fuel slowly burned away in engines that continued running faithfully, despite the death of everyone they served. The aircraft had become a flying tomb, carrying its human cargo toward destiny, while autopilot systems continued with mechanical indifference to the tragedy they perpetuated. Inside the aircraft during this extended period of unconsciousness, one remarkable figure emerged. Flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, who held a private pilot license, had apparently remained conscious longer than others, possibly due to youth, physical fitness, or access to portable oxygen equipment. Cockpit recordings would later reveal that Prodromou had made his way through the unconscious cabin to enter the cockpit where both pilots lay incapacitated. What he found must have been terrifying beyond imagination. Two experienced pilots completely unconscious, warning systems flashing throughout the cockpit, and the horrible realization that he was the only conscious person aboard an aircraft, carrying 121 people at deadly altitude, with fuel running critically low. Prodromou's heroic but futile efforts represent one of aviation's most tragic examples of courage facing certain death. As someone with basic pilot training, he understood their desperate situation, but lacked advanced training necessary to operate a complex commercial airliner under the most challenging conditions imaginable. He faced an impossible task that would challenge even experienced airline pilots, attempting to save an aircraft that had been flying hours beyond planned flight time, burning fuel without possibility of reaching any airport safely. As the left engine flamed out from fuel starvation, the aircraft began losing altitude rapidly. The autopilot disengaged with warning chimes echoing through the unconscious cabin. Prodromou, alone with two unconscious pilots, watched aircraft systems cascade into failure around him. The right engine continued running, but would soon suffer the same fate, leaving Flight 522 as a powerless glider with aerodynamics of a brick. At 12:04 p.m., nearly 3 hours after Captain Schneider's final transmission, Helios Airways Flight 522 crashed into a mountain near Grammatico, 40 kilometers north of Athens. The impact was devastating, creating a crater and scattering debris across a wide area. There were no survivors among the 115 passengers and 6 crew members. The passenger manifest read like a cross-section of human experience. 48 children who would never grow up, parents who would never see graduations or weddings, grandparents who would never tell another story, and friends who would never laugh together again. The investigation revealed the tragic simplicity of the accident's cause. A single switch, left in wrong position during routine maintenance, had doomed everyone aboard. The cabin pressurization system had functioned exactly as programmed when set to manual mode, waiting for human input that never came because the humans responsible had been rendered unconscious by the same failure they might have corrected if they had recognized its nature. This disaster fundamentally changed aviation safety worldwide. Enhanced pilot training now includes extensive hypoxia recognition, with simulator exercises recreating confusion and time pressure of real oxygen deprivation events. Maintenance procedures underwent comprehensive revision with multiple independent verifications of critical systems. Aircraft warning systems received improvements to make pressurization emergencies unmistakable, reducing possibility for misinterpretation that proved fatal aboard Flight 522. The families of victims fought legal battles, seeking accountability, and changes preventing other families from experiencing similar losses. Their loved ones had not died in traditional impact trauma, but had been trapped conscious during initial hypoxia stages, aware something was wrong, but unable to save themselves. These families became advocates for safety improvements, ensuring their losses contributed to preventing future disasters. Memorial services honored all 121 victims, with particular recognition for Andreas Prodromo's extraordinary courage attempting to save the aircraft during final minutes when hope seemed lost. His actions, though unsuccessful in preventing the crash, demonstrated selfless heroism that inspires others to act courageously when facing impossible circumstances. If this story has moved you, please honor the memory of those lost by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with others. Aviation safety advances through awareness of past tragedies, ensuring these 121 victims did not die in vain. Every subscription and share helps spread awareness that prevents future disasters by keeping Flight 522's lessons alive in public consciousness. Like this video if it has given you deeper appreciation for complex systems keeping air travel safe and dedicated professionals working tirelessly to prevent such disasters. The ghost flight of Helios Airways. Flight 522 remains aviation's most haunting reminder that routine operations can turn deadly when multiple failures combine catastrophically. In those final hours, as 121 people sat unconscious while their aircraft flew circles over the Mediterranean, Flight 522 carried not just human bodies but dreams, hopes, relationships, and futures of families expecting reunions that would never come. Andreas Prodromo's lonely struggle represents both tragedy of individual powerlessness against mechanical failure and inspiration of human courage, refusing surrender even when death seems certain. Their memory lives on in every safe flight that follows, every improved safety procedure implemented in their honor, and every passenger who arrives safely because the aviation industry learned from mistakes that killed them.